Oh yeah!
Welcome everyone to this edition of Fish Stripes Alive. I'm your host Daniel, and tonight we will be previewing the series between your Miami Marlins and the NL East Division leader, the New York Mets. Before we start, let me introduce everyone here tonight. You can see it's a smaller stream, but that means we'll have more opinions, more topics to discuss. First, he's the man behind everything, the videos, the quotes. It's Mr. Eli Sussman. We also have floating right in front of Lone Depot Park, Adam Adbani, and our guest tonight, Mr. Travis Riley. Travis, it is great to have you on tonight.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
The first topic I really want to discuss with everyone is the game or the series we saw between the Marlins and the Philadelphia Phillies. Marlins did not come on the winning end of that series, but did take the final game of that, which hopefully brings some momentum going up against one of the tougher teams in baseball. Travis, what were your thoughts between the Marlins and the Phillies, just overall, just that entire series between Miami and Philly?
Well, I should have cut in to say prior to the show that Travis is on a very well-deserved strike of the team. Is that right? Of like not watching the team on a daily basis recently.
Yeah,
with understanding recently how things have gone with the team. So I'll lead it off with quick thoughts. Travis can jump in from what he's seen secondhand. But from that series, I mean, you really need to look at it from back to front in order to feel any sort of positivity about it. If you look at the last game of the series, it's the first time in over a month that they've scored since the trade deadline, that they've scored 6 runs in a non-extra inning game. It's the first time they've done that. And it wasn't the prettiest way to get there. There was doubt that they would get there until the very end, obviously trailing heading into the 9th inning, 5-4, before stitching together that rally and getting some help from, I think it was a Rhys Hoskins error. It was a Angel Hernandez error, technically, on a check swing that should have been a strikeout and instead was a walk to Avi Garcia. So they were able to squeak out that final win and was able to cover up for what was, by Sandy's standards, another mediocre outing, and also to cover up for JJ Bleday, who made a couple really ugly defensive miscues in center field as well. The previous 2 games are kind of what we're used to with this team, losing by 1 run, just coming up a little bit short offensively, and just not doing the little things quite like fluently enough in order to make up for their obvious deficiencies. And at least they were able to snap the losing streak, because it had gotten to the point 9 straight games where, I mean, they were getting close to one of the longer losing streaks in team history to this point, which I continue to be amazed just like how low the season keeps sinking and sinking and sinking. But as you mentioned, of course, Thursday was fun. That was a fun game, and I know very few people were watching because it coincided with the NFL season opener, because for other obvious reasons as well. But as you said, like kind of inside the team as well, they really needed that. They really needed to squeak out that win just for their own sanity, I would say.
Yeah. Adam, what were your thoughts watching either that final game or any of the first 2 prior to that? Because it was definitely a wild series for the Marlins.
Yeah, and honestly, for me, once again, fantastic pitching outings from Jesus, Trevor, and Sandy. Obviously, Sandy had those couple unearned runs towards the end of the game in his 5th inning. But once again, yes, it's just a testament to how poor the offense has been all season, and more like microscopically looking the past couple of months. And it's really, really been unfortunate to watch the Marlins potentially having almost a winning season in the middle of July, and now we're looking back to potentially having another top 5 pick in the draft. So it's been an outstanding season from the rotation, and those 3 guys that I talked about earlier pitch really well. They deserve kudos for how they played, but once again, it's the offense coming up short, and it's really frustrating to watch.
Yeah, Eli mentioned before, Travis, you're going on a strike for the Marlins, but does that include Sandy Day? Is Sandy a part of the strike?
No. As long as Sandy's in the Cy Young contention, he is not a part of the strike. And I'll be honest, a couple of his blow-ups a couple starts ago, I had to turn off, not because I'm mad. You can't be mad at Sandy. He's amazing, but it's too painful to watch, on some of those where there's 6 hits strung in a row or whatever's going on. It always seems to start with like some bad defense or a blue play, and then it just cascades or he's tipping, and it's been really rough. But I watched yesterday, and as Eli said, it wasn't it wasn't an A+ Sandy start. It wasn't even like a B- Sandy start, but technically a quality start, I guess. So that's cool. And it didn't help his Cy Young case, but it didn't do enough, I don't think, to knock him back from it. So I'm still excited about Sandy. I still want to tune in for all of the Sandy games. I don't know if we're going to get to this earlier or later, but I saw that Braxton Garrett might be coming into the rotation, and I don't know if that pushes Sandy out of Rangers and Nationals territory. If that's the case, that would be very tragic. So I don't know, but I did watch yesterday's game, and that was kind of a fun one, and I was glad to see us get the win. I was, kind of hate watching, expecting to go to like a 10-game losing streak, but like I honestly, I was happy for Avi to get 3 hits yesterday. Like that was amazing for him. I think the only bit of bad news of yesterday was I was kind of on the fence about Bleday, and then after he dropped that, I can't imagine him being our starter next year, but maybe, I don't know.
Right. It's just, that was the moment. You really know it when you see it. You know it when it happened with Jesus Sanchez, in terms of when going into it, everybody expected him to not succeed as a center fielder. And there were moments like that inside the park home run in Tampa Bay and a couple others that really hammered home that like this guy is out of place. He's not put in the right position. With Bleday, center field's been his primary spot since he got called up. It's not supposed to be a spot based on his minor league track record, based on everything I thought I knew about him as a player. And yet there just hadn't been that many obvious mistakes to this point in the year. And then last night is one of those times where you're reminded, it's really hammered home. All right, this guy's not supposed to be here. So it was that one really egregious drop. Then that other one, he played into a triple that I don't know if it was really catchable for most players, but especially not for him in that situation based on where he was positioned as well. So it doesn't really change a whole lot about how we feel about Bleday long-term in terms of a player overall, except for the fact that it hammers home something that should have already been understood, that they need to go outside the organization and find a center fielder, because it's not going to be him, even if he does turn it around offensively.
Yeah, Travis, I wanted to ask you really quick on Sandy. For you, despite he's kind of been struggling the last couple starts, except for that, I believe the complete game against the Dodgers. But just for you, is he still your favorite for? I know we say this a lot for Cy Young. Is he your clear cut number one, or do you see other guys maybe inching their way to Sandy, or is he just the guy?
He's still my clear cut number one. The gap is getting a little smaller, I guess, but there's not a lot of time left in the season, and it's a pretty large gap. I think, the Dodgers are always going to get votes for that. The Dodgers have a lot of friends in the media, but I don't think they have. I mean, especially now with Gonsolin not going to crack. What was he at, like 40 innings for the season or something? I'm exaggerating, but it feels that way. He's not in contention, so. Yeah, I think I listened to your guys' broadcast last week when you talked about, would Sandy have a shot in the AL? Yeah. Excuse me. I don't know that he would, but in the National League right now, I think it's still his to lose.
Yeah, I think it's clear cut Sandy number one, and then it falls down to guys like Max Fried and maybe someone like Corbin Burns, and even former Marlin Zach Gallen is pitching pretty well as of late. But we'll change topics and really talk about the big rule change that happened earlier today with baseball. I believe next year shift has been banned. Am I correct?
Sort of. Yeah, sort of. We'll share the specifics on the screen right here about 3 major changes. The first, really the main one, even more so than the shift, is the pitch clock coming in and totally changing the pace of game that we're going to have, or at least making it mandatory that what has been kind of in use in the minor leagues, especially recently, is now going to be part in the major leagues. But as you mentioned with the shift, they are going to make it so that it's 2, as best they can, they're going to enforce so that it's just 2 infielders on each side of the diamond at all times. So they call it not a banning of the shift, but they're calling it a limitation on the defensive shift. And it's a fascinating one. So as it says right here, this is from MLB.com, just laying out the specifics that were agreed to from this competition committee, that the 4 infielders must be within the outer boundary of the infield dirt when the pitcher is on the rubber. Okay. So yeah, there's room in here for some loopholes, for some creative interpretation, I imagine. Anytime there's new rules, there are always like unintended consequences of them that we can't foresee. But infielders can't switch sides of the field unless it's like a specific substitution or position change. And that still, the rule doesn't change outfielders from coming into the infield and adding additional players to your infield from the outfield in situations like that. But it does prohibit 4 outfielder alignments, which weren't being used that much anyway. That's mostly a Tampa Bay Rays thing. Very few teams have like gone that far and tried the 4 outfielder thing. They're trying to get more results on balls in play. And I think Adam could probably speak to this better than I could about the fact that, especially in the last couple of years, I think we've seen a dip in batting average on balls in play. But for most of Major League history, and even like a lot of these shift years that we've seen, it hasn't budged that much. So it's still kind of debatable how much the shift part of it will actually change, just based on what we've seen, that there's been a lot of shifting and it affects particular players very severely. In terms of the league overall, maybe not as much as we might think in our minds.
Yeah, and Eli, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, to kind of like give an idea like into the rules, like I'm just very curious about like the shifting one. I was talking with one of my friends earlier today. We were kind of comparing this to kind of like banning like the zone coverage in like football or like in basketball. It's like you're taking away like a team's ability to play defense as optimally as they see fit, and like we were talking about it as well within our own chat. Like if they are to, if they're going to fail, let them fail, but don't prevent them from potentially succeeding with the strategy that they have in play, if it is going to work well. So like, they have ways that they're going to police this. And we talked about how the players didn't really have a lot of say in the votes overall. And that's a different story, but overall, like I like the rule changes. Like I think the pitch clock is going to be one that's going to help cut down the game times and unnecessary just moving around. Although I think the bigger issue is more fan engagement. But overall, like I think it's an okay direction. I know I kind of like was freaking out over like big time. The shift one was the one I really just don't understand at all. But all the other ones are kind of okay. But I really just feel like this is the big, like it really kind of blunders it all and kind of like ruins it and taints the joy of really like looking into the other rules, just because this is a big deal in my opinion. And you guys know where I like to come from when I like to interpret things and analyze things.
Yeah. Travis, I'd love to get your side on, are there anything that you're really looking at with these rule changes, whether it's the shift or it's a pitch timer? Is there anything that really stands out to you when looking at these new rules for next season?
Yeah. I mean, the pitch timer, I think is great. Let's speed it up a little bit. I'm kind of curious if there's any interplay between that and like batters calling timeouts every like 3 at bats. I feel like that's happening all the time now, and that slows it down and gets the pitchers out of rhythm. Do they get to reset the full clock and all that? I'm curious about the ins and outs, but the shift, I'm gonna agree pretty much wholeheartedly with Adam. I think it's lame to ban the shift. It's lame. Not only does it take away, as he said, a defense's ability to do the best they can to kind of outsmart a hitter, but like I think one of the great longstanding traditions of baseball is it's a game of adjustments, right? And like every couple of years it goes back and forth. It seems like the pitchers will have the upper hand, or the hitters will. And like I feel like the hitters could have adjusted to this. It might have taken a while, and it might not have been the old vets that we love so much. Clearly Miggy Rojas, for instance, isn't adjusting to this, but like I feel like, the guys coming up, they are adjusting to it, and we would have gotten past it. And like, by shifting, you're creating some huge gaps in your defense, and there's a lot of opportunity to exploit that if you're a smart hitter. And I would have liked to see how that evolved over the next couple of years, but from the Marlins standpoint, you guys are the experts and you can speak to this better than me, but my guess is that it's kind of good for the Marlins. I don't have the stats to back this up, but it feels like Mattingly overshifts a little bit and we get burned by that. And so that not happening next season, I would be happy with. And, we do ground out a lot. So not having 3 guys on the side that, our hitters can't switch off of, that might help too. So I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah. Alex coming in, Fish on a Farm. Let's talk about Josh Simpson. No, I'm kidding.
No, I think he's a perfect guy to have on here about the pitch timer, of course, because they've been using it in the minors, I think dating back to either 2018 or 2019. And then, of course, this year at all levels of the minors, Alex has been used to this and seeing the way that guys react to it and getting their opinions of it, getting the players' perspective as well on whether they like it or not. Alex, are we satisfied with the fact that it's coming to the major leagues? Is it going to be a net positive overall?
Well, you have to excuse my voice because I'm getting over being sick, first of all, but and no camera either for me tonight because I look like crap. But anyways, to answer this question, I mean, I think if you talk to minor league baseball players, you'll find kind of mixed sentiment, but it's just something that they've gotten used to. It's something that guys have really struggled with at the start in terms of some pitchers that like to work the game a little more slowly. And they've had to adjust in that regard where they have to throw a pitch in, 15 seconds or whatever it is. They have to get back on the rubber and start the throw. And it's helped some guys in being able to work more quickly. I think for some pitchers, it really has done them good in that they've learned how to work more quickly when maybe they don't have the best stuff or as good stuff as other guys. They learned how to work more quickly and have gained an advantage because of the pitch clock, which is not something that we're doing before. And then for other guys who did have good stuff and did like to work very methodically, they kind of have not gone in the opposite direction, but they were the guys that were taking the base penalties for the clock running out or ball penalties, whatever the hell they were doing. So I think it was a base penalty actually if the clock ran out. So it's mixed sentiment overall in terms of guys in the minor leagues. The shift rule one is something that has definitely, and they were working this out in Jupiter this year, it's something that has definitely led to a lot more offense, which I think is exactly what Major League Baseball wants. They want more offense. And does it take the lineup card out of the manager's back pocket a little bit and the fielding coach's back pocket a little bit? Yes, it does. But overall, I think it's not terrible for baseball because you'll see more hits. You'll see better batting averages. You'll probably see slightly higher, like BABIPs and stuff like that for pitchers. So overall, neither rule is bad. I really don't think either one is terrible. I think both of them do a service for the game. Major League Baseball players and minor league baseball players also did not like when they were sitting in a dugout for 4.5 hours because there were, before the 3-pitcher or the 3-batter minimum that they instituted last year, right? Or a couple of years ago. That was something that really slowed down a baseball game with the loogie left-handed 1-out guys and stuff like that. That's something that needed to go. And I think this is a necessary step for the league. I understand that minor leaguers weren't happy because they didn't really have a say. Major League Baseball pretty much just outvoted them, and I can understand their frustration. But if they did get to have an equal vote, I think it would have passed anyways. So overall, I think both rules are fine for baseball. I really don't I know Adam's against them, but I really don't think either one's bad for the game, to answer that question.
Yeah, I just want to clarify what he mentioned about the players not having a say. Like on this committee, there's 6 representatives from the team, and there was 1 from the umpires, and there was 4 from the players. So, I mean, you do the math, and I don't know exactly how this came about. I haven't looked into it, but the players were outnumbered, and it was based, even all the players themselves actually, their representatives officially rejected the specifics of these rule changes, and yet they passed anyway, simply because of how this committee was structured. And so I'm curious about that. Ultimately, I think it was just a matter of semantics where the players might have had different opinions on the length of the timer. So it's 15 seconds with the bases empty. It's going to be 20 seconds with any runners on base. So maybe with those specifics or other like minute considerations, like the general idea, I think, is it would have gone past, but the Players Association did release a statement saying that they felt they were upset by the outcome of this and that they didn't feel comfortable with the the rules as they are specifically written. What you're seeing on the screen is what they had into effect at low A in Jupiter this year, where you see that those lines where it's a different at the major league level. The rule they ultimately agreed on is different in that with this, they kind of went to an extreme and that you're not really allowed to get anywhere close to crossing second base as the middle infielders. But the way that this rule has come together at the major league level, it's going to be that you can really inch all the way up to the base itself. So they're not going to have these lines, this extreme, this triangle as they were using the minors, but that's why they use it in the minors as like a test case. And so ultimately they decided it's to limit the shift, but in a way that's not quite as extreme as they tested it out in the lower levels this year.
Yeah, you mentioned the shift. Are there any players that really come to your mind, or anybody on the stream that, speaking of banning or limiting the shift, you think will benefit greatly next season? Are there any players now, now that there's a shift, maybe would now be better players, better hitters, better averages, now that the shift has been limited compared to this year and previous years?
Yeah. So, I mean, one guy I can think off the top of my head is a former Cardinal, Matt Carpenter. His a lot of the reasons why you see his ex-WOBA strongly outperforming his WOBA just abstractly is because he does hit into a lot of shifts. Honestly, you could get a good idea of in general who's going to be benefiting. You can just kind of sort by who pulls the ball quite a bit, and you can see who has the highest WRC plus, or who has a delta between their ex-WOBA and WOBA. That's a negative delta, and you can see that would kind of help them in some way. Obviously, it's not a perfect thing, and there's plenty of other reasons as to why that delta might exist, but you could potentially expect to see an improvement on that because they will no longer be able to heavily pack up the pull side of a hitter, or if he pushes one the other way, conversely. I think those guys are going to benefit greatly. So Matt Carpenter is just one example. I think Brandon Belt is another, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think we should give some Marlins names because most of our audience are Marlins fans. So the three that come to mind for me, and just looking at the stats to verify their pull rate, it's Jazz, it's JJ Bleday, it's Lewin Diaz. And I mean, you could argue with Lewin as to whether a shift can even save him as a viable big league hitter, considering he's also limited to first base. With Jazz, I mean, this is good news. I mean, even as if he really needed any more help, this would be a big help to him. And Bleday is the one that's probably most impacted among the Marlins players that stick out to me, considering what we've seen from him this year, the fact that he is hitting in the 180s this point in the season. But by the eye test, he looks a lot better than that. And a lot of the reason why is because, especially this year at the minor leagues, he went into this new hitting profile where he is very extreme in pulling the ball. To this point, only a few of those had actually gone over the wall. Most of the other ones have been easy outs. And I think that would change to some extent if you now have less of an overload on the right side of the infield. He's one guy in particular that did this. Maybe he did this kind of with the foresight, understanding that this change may have been coming at the major league level as well, because he was not like this when they drafted him a few years ago. This was a very conscious change to him, and one that, to this point in his rookie season, unfortunately, he hasn't produced enough to kind of solidified himself. As we talked about a little earlier, is that you can't feel totally confident in him as an everyday player. Now, if you put this into the fold, then maybe you start seeing a little bit more optimistic. So, I mean, ultimately with him, you'd like to see more success these next few weeks heading into the offseason, and then you can kind of project improvement from there. So for him, I think in particular, Bleday is the one that sticks out most as somebody that could go from being kind of a fringy major leaguer to being somebody that hits at an above average level if he gets more of those hits, singles and doubles to the right side that he's not getting right now under the current rules.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to talk about was, I think it'd probably be best to Alex Carver to talk on it as resident, farm minors, about the unionization of right now with the minor league baseball and it being recognized by Rob Manfred and the MLB. Alex, what does this mean for minor league players now that they're finally going to be recognized by the majors? Is this any significance? Is this something that we should look at? What are your thoughts on this? And maybe you can explain to some of us what this means.
Well, it is. It's one of the bigger developments for minor league players in a long time. I don't think it got the attention that it deserved. It did get the attention, yes, but it did not get the attention that it deserved. Is this, everything that minor leaguers ever wanted? Not really, but it is a very big step for them because they now have a say. They have a seat at the table. Their voices will be heard when there are any sort of, bargaining agreements or any sort of anything between Major League Baseball and the Players Association. So they will now have some sort of say in those negotiations, and their concerns will be listened to, catered to, and heard. So it is a very, very big step for minor leaguers. It's a huge credit to an organization like Advocates for Minor Leaguers, all of whom I think all of them that worked on their board of directors are now or were offered jobs within the MLBPA. So that just shows you exactly what those people did to get this done and to get this to happen. So it was literally a pressure campaign, and that's exactly what needed to happen. So, and they literally did it, and they did their due diligence and did their work for many, many years. I don't know exactly how many, but they've been around for a long time, campaigning, advocating, showing pictures, showing documentation about how minor leaguers used to live. They were a main contributor in getting the housing thing done for minor leaguers, and they were a big, big part in getting this done for minor leaguers. And the fact that they now have a say also in the Players Association is also big for them. So it's really, really big. It's a big story. It should be a big story. So it's a very welcome development for minor league players that will now have a say in those negotiations. So yes, it's a big deal.
Yeah, and with that, will we happen to know how the minor league unionization is going to be maybe dealt, or how they're going to handle with representatives, who represents them when talking to Major League Baseball or Rob Manfred? Because it's a little different with MLB guys in the minors go up and down. Would have to be someone who's spent a well amount of time in the minors? Is it someone who's maybe still a major leaguer who can represent the minors? Would you happen to know how that representation will work for the minor league players union?
I don't. I would think that what you're saying is probably true. That they would like to get, a good variety of guys, maybe some veteran guys, like you said, a major leaguer, maybe that's retired, that spent a long time in the minor leagues to help represent minor leaguers would be like a good forefront of it. And then some guys behind that. But yeah, it would be very hard to have, during the season, it would be hard to have current players, but in the off season, you could have current minor leaguers in there as well. Invited, like we saw during the lockout, they had current major leaguers. So that could be a thing. But yeah, I think what you said is probably going to be true, is that it will be like a smaller group of guys that are invited to be representatives. And that would be a guess, but I don't know for sure.
All right. If anyone else has anything else to discuss, I was gonna move on a little bit and talk about the Mets.
Let Astudillo be one of the minor league union reps, because he's amazing down there. He's the example that everybody aspires to. And he, unfortunately, off the 40-man roster at this point and not coming back for the Marlins anytime soon. He's going to be around a while. That is a fascinating question about exactly what that would look like.
Yeah.
Considering what the important step, as Alex mentioned, is the fact that this is absorbed within the MLB Players Association at this point. Before, if they're completely different entities, I'm not entirely sure how that works. And I think that was just part of the thinking here, in the fact that the Minor League Advocates board was brought in by the MLB Players Association. It makes a lot more sense, just considering how much overlap there is between those two groups of workers. So that'll be fascinating to follow. And this is, to me, a little bit of a pleasant surprise that they were able to voluntarily reach this point so early. I was wondering exactly when or what the conflict would be. And there's going to be conflicts down the road. I don't think this is going to be an easy transition to a new way of compensating minor league players and treating them. But for Rob Manfred to at least reach this point without allowing things to get too messy, this is positive news for sure.
Yeah, if I had to give my nomination for a Marlins representative for the minor league union, I'm all the way on Ryan LaVarnaway. I think he would be perfect for it. Major league experience in the minors, one of the older veterans, also great on social media. So that's my nominee right there. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about the Mets. the NL East division leading Mets? Maybe, because it is a tight race between them and the Atlanta Braves. Just 0.5 games separating Atlanta and the New York Mets. Travis, tell us a little bit about, this little race between the Braves and the Mets. What should we expect, and maybe just how good is this New York team?
I mean, this New York team is really great. I'm a casual fan. I'm not tuning into a lot of Mets games when they're not playing the Marlins, but watching them play the Marlins, their lineup is killer, man. Like and it seems like every batter can like take the pitcher to like 13 pitches or something like that too. They've just been killing our pitchers, and they don't swing and miss, and they just, with 2 outs, they keep coming through. That said, it's September, so what do you get in September? You get I don't know, back to school specials at Target, and you get your wacky uncle sharing like a quasi racist 9/11 post or something like that on Facebook, and then you get the Mets collapsing. So like I know everyone's like, it's not a collapse this year, guys. It's the Braves. They're just surging, and the Braves are, as we've all seen, super talented as well. But I really wonder if the Mets are going to be on top in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and another thing with the Mets, I believe if he's still there, Max Scherzer was sent to the IL. So do we know how long that's going to be or the type of injury? Because he's most likely not going to play against Miami.
Yeah, it's not even possible for him to come back for this series. The teams do meet once more at the end of September, so he'll be eligible to return back then. There's optimism that he'll be back before the end of the regular season. It's another it stems from his oblique injury that he had during the first half of the year. So it's kind of an offshoot of that. They thought they had that completely behind him. Obviously, he was pitching at an amazing level since he came back from that longer IL stint. So they're not calling it a full strain as before. And the original injury, that oblique strain, it kept him out, more than a month? It kept him out a month before he even began rehabbing. So if it was the same severity as before, then all of a sudden that puts the rest of his season and his postseason availability in doubt. But they think they caught it early enough so that's not as significant. That's why they waited kind of to the last minute to name tonight's starter in Dustin Peterson. Dustin Peterson. That's not his name. His name is David Peterson. David Peterson. I should put some respect on his name because he's actually been pitching pretty well this year with this team. But I admit to being a little wrong in underestimating the Braves. Not really overestimating the Mets. The fact that they've kind of been treading water for a while. But the reason why the Braves have essentially caught them at this point is because they've played at such an amazing level. They have, I think if you break it down over the last 80 games or so, they had the best record in baseball, even better than the Dodgers. And that's why it's not really a collapse. History will look at it as a collapse for sure. Whenever they were up by about double-digit games at the best, the way that history will look back on it, if they do finish behind the Braves, it's going to be very cruel to them. The reality as we're living through it is that the Mets still seem to be a pretty solid and complete team. The issue is that the Braves have been just amazing. And so the Marlins saw that firsthand, and both these teams have given the Marlins kind of equal trouble this year. I think the Mets have already clinched the season series against the Marlins, even with 5 more games to go.
Yeah, and another player injured I was just looking at right now, Marlins legend Starling Marte. Yeah, he's day-to-day. I don't believe he's in the lineup, but I believe that's something else. Maybe the Marlins could kind of tackle that, try to use that to try to get a win, because that is one of their better players, one of the better hitters, and also good defensively. I think with that, let's get into this preview. Let's get into these lineups, and let's see who's playing tonight for the Marlins and the Mets. As you can see, it is always a lot of red for the opposing team in Miami. Not so much.
Yeah, for these guys. Well, the Marlins, they've done this a few times, especially recently, going with the all right-handed lineup against lefties because they're so helpless against left-handed pitching all year long. And yet when they've done this, it just does not work. They continue to do it anyway, just for whatever reason. And at least there's a lot of young guys in there. Of course, Gerard Encarnacion and Charles LeBlanc. Well, actually, there's really not a whole lot of young guys in there tonight. But Fortes, it's good to see Fortes catching Eddie Cabrera tonight after getting, I think, each of the last couple of days with Stallings as well. but it's all righties. None of these guys especially hot, except for Cooper. If you focus on the last few days, I don't know if we mentioned that before with the Philly series, but Cooper is finally back to life again. Like, he was great in that series. He went 5 for 12 and he didn't strike out in 3 games for a guy that for the most part, the last month and a half has been absolutely awful. This was a really nice step forward. I think it's legit. I wrote up an article about Cooper's struggles, and at the end I said, I think he is going to shake out of this and finish off looking kind of like his normal self. Like, it didn't seem to be anything that was a permanent, irreversible decline or anything like that. So it's good to see him just coming back to life. Like, he is, it's hard to really make a case for anybody else as being a better hitter in this lineup than Cooper is. And for the longest time, for almost a quarter of the season, he's been an automatic out. Yet, I think that was only a temporary thing. He's a streaky hitter within seasons. Yet when he breaks out of it, he goes back to being a really dangerous, borderline all-star caliber bat. So at least he's in there to give a little bit of hope to this lineup that is otherwise very uninspiring.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this Mets lineup, and it's just incredible just looking at it. Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor, Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, Mark Canha, who I was an advocate for in Marlins signing this season. And also Daniel Vogelbach has been pretty nice for the Mets. A lot of red there has given the team some life and some really great social media posts also with Vogelbach. Adam, looking at this lineup, let's go a little bit on the Mets. Let's talk a little bit. What really stood out to you on this Mets side? Who is someone maybe to look out for on that Mets lineup?
Well, I mean, we've got Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso, who, in my opinion, are probably their 2 best players. Pete Alonso, I think, is second in the National League in RBIs, behind my favorite for MVP, Paul Goldschmidt. Obviously, I'm biased, but we could all back that up pretty easily. Francisco Lindor having a fantastic rebound year from last year, his first year in Flushing. Really seen the ball a lot better this year, and his xwOBA is really starting to come into fruition, along with his regular WOBA. And I really do believe that he is going to be a very good player in New York for many years to come. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, well, he's going to be there for it's at least 10 more years. I'm not sure how long he signed for the extension, but I think, for me, I think it's going to be Lindor and Pete Alonso. And Jeff McNeil as well is a very good player, and he's always been a very consistent second baseman for the Mets. So those 3 guys are probably my favorites.
Yeah. Travis, same question for you. Maybe someone you're really looking at, someone for this series. Could be either Marlins or the Mets. What really intrigues you when looking at these lineups?
I mean, yeah, just looking at the screen here, it's a bloodbath on the left side. There's way too much red. It's a little scary that as Adam said, that 2-3-4 is brutal, and it just I don't know how the pitcher feels out on the mound, but I get, when I'm at home watching and you walk like the 8th or 9th batter, you're like, oh no, it's it's coming back around again that much quicker, and it really, I don't know, takes the spirit out of you. On the Marlins side, I think one storyline we're not getting a lot of play on is the home run leader for the team, right? If you talk about active roster, you don't have Aguilar. He's in Baltimore eating crab cakes on the bench or whatever. You don't have Jazz. I think your guy Isaac posted an update about Jazz today. It's the first thing I've seen in a couple months. But I think you don't have anyone who's in double digits right now on the active roster, which you have.
Wow.
For my 8 minutes of research, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is we have 4 guys that are tied at 7. We have, there we go. We have Fortes, we have Avi, we have DLC, and we have Cooper, and all 4 are in the lineup tonight, and maybe for the whole series. So I'm really curious, if any of these guys can get to 10 before the end of the season, or how that's going to go. So that's one of the storylines I'm going to be watching.
Wow, I didn't even realize that they were all tied at 7. That's a depressing state of affairs when it's DLC tied for your active home run leader on the active roster as well. Yeah, with this Jazz update that Travis referred to, it's really dicey as to whether he'll even make it back before the end of the season. He's in good spirits. He's with the team. He's kind of physically, in terms of his day-to-day life, it's not being affected by this back injury anymore. It's about whether he gets to the point where they want him to do baseball activities again. For people following closely with the minors, the lower minor league levels are about to end their seasons. So in terms of actually getting opportunities to play rehab games, his only option would be with AAA down the stretch as well. But I mean, he needs to be cleared for those baseball activities before even thinking about a rehab assignment. And then that rehab assignment would have to be several games as well. It's a coin flip as to whether he even gets back by the end of the year. And honestly, that might be generous. It's probably less than a coin flip. That they're not going to rule him out until they absolutely have to, right? There are people buying Marlins tickets right now for the end of the season, thinking in the back of their minds, maybe Jazz is on the team by then. And this team, you could go back almost 2 months ago. It's really been almost 2 months since we were talking about the All-Star game, and they wouldn't rule him out until the last possible minute. So it's the same deal with this. And included in the injury update is with Braxton Garrett, as Travis also alluded to earlier in the show with Braxton. He's all signs point to him pitching on Monday. They have a doubleheader right after the series. I mention it now because we're not going to be able to do a series preview full stream for that doubleheader. It's a day-night doubleheader. So nobody's going to really be around on a Monday morning to watch that preview. So we could already look ahead to that a little bit as well. All signs point to Braxton pitching one of those games. And then the curious decision from that point is whether they actually just stick with a 6-man rotation from there on out. That's the one like unequivocal bright spot about this team is the rotation. Even Trevor Rogers, since he's come back from his IL, he's been more respectable than he had been for most of this year. So there's no obvious person going out of the rotation to make room for Garrett as well. I suspect that it's a really strong consideration that they just ride with the 6-man rotation, beginning with this coming week over the last few weeks of the season. That's just one thing to keep in mind about the state of the Marlins pitching staff.
Yeah. Travis mentioned the home runs. I wanted to ask you guys kind of like a question for this. Does a Marlins player, and maybe you could tell us who, finish above 10 home runs? Maybe what is the most home runs the Marlins are going to get this season by one player? Who leads it, and what's the number?
Well, the numbers of the injured guys and of the traded away guys, those still count, right? So Aggie. But if you're saying among the ones that are actually healthy between Fortes, DLC, and Cooper and Avi, I mean, that's pretty clear cut for me with Cooper. I think Cooper is going to finish this year really strong. Like, I think the slump is behind him, that it was more mental than physical with him, and that he's this past series was the start of him breaking out of it. So I think he's going to hit a few more at the end of the year. I think he finishes with 11 home runs, and that's unfortunately going to be more than these other guys on the active roster, unfortunately. But I think Cooper is going to be a reason to tune in for these final few weeks. Him getting sort of back to being an all-star caliber hitter again.
All right, Travis, do you have a player and a number they might hit at the end of the season?
Yeah, I agree with Eli that Cooper, it's been great to see him back to form since the All-Star break. He's looking really good now, which we missed, and he might be our best guy here on out. That said, I'm going with Fortes. I think he can get to 10. They'll be random ones. They might not be game winners, but get there.
Adam?
Okay, so I'm just looking at the stats here. I had to find it. I do. So he came back from AAA and he's been slugging pretty well this past series against the Phillies. I'm going to go with Avisail Garcia, who's sitting right now at 7. I think now that he's been demoted to AAA, he had a chance to retool that swing and kind of figure himself out. Now that he's back in the majors, he had, like I mentioned, a really good series against the Phillies and Citizens Bank. So I think he's my favorite to finish the season strong. And I think especially now going into next year, he's going to be one of those that benefits from the rule change, just like Jorge Soler will. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot better from Avi Garcia for the rest of his contract, especially with these rule changes.
Yeah, I had the same thought process there with Avi, especially last night. I believe he had 3 hits. I think Avi is probably going to lead the team in home runs in terms of active players, not named, Jesus Aguilar or Jazz Chisholm. And I think he's going to get 12. He could probably hit 13. I think he might go on a little hot streak with games still with the Rangers and the Nationals. And I think Avi Garcia is going to lead the active roster in home runs. Alex, do you have a player and a number that you might give us in terms of home runs?
Well, if he played as often as he should have, I think Fortes already would have been over 10. But that's going backwards. To look ahead, I mean, I think it's. I know we have to find things to talk about, but the fact that we're talking about Anyone getting double-digit home runs is a little bit, telling of where this season is. But to answer your question and give you guys, I'll go with Fortes. The power potential is there for him. I love that guy. I think he should have been catching a lot more than he was this year, or at least in the lineup a lot more. So Fortes, I have zero confidence in Avi Garcia. Garrett Cooper's month of August was absolutely horrendous. So yeah, I'll go with Fortes.
Yeah. Oh, you muted, Eli.
Yeah. Well, while we have Alex, one more thing from our super follower, Gabriel Ravia, about the prospects. I wanted to get your thoughts quickly, Alex, on Jacob Berry, because he's hitting finally. He is kind of heating up. As I'm looking at it now, a 112 WRC plus in Jupiter. 100 is league average. So he's kind of significantly above average as a hitter, as that was kind of the expectation coming in, but making a lot of contacts, getting on base at a pretty high level, still not hitting the ball over the wall all that much. But all things considered, this first start of him in pro ball at low A, it's gone all right. It hasn't been a disaster. Like, he seems to be, we're feeling pretty good about him probably moving forward to high A next year. What do you think?
I do. I think I agree. I think he will move to Beloit next season as a 21-year-old. Well, he'll be 20. Well, yeah, 21. Just turned 21 in May? Yeah, I think his birthday's May.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he'll be 22 at the time. By the time that season starts, well, just about to turn 22 by the time the season starts, I guess. If you're thinking April for spring training, so May, right? So yeah, he'll be a newly turned 22-year-old by the time minor league season is about to get underway, and I think he's solid. I don't think he's got it all figured out yet, but that's what needs to happen with these players coming out of a draft. I mean, I know everybody wanted to see him go to Jupiter and start hitting home runs immediately, or FCL and start hitting home runs immediately. And when that doesn't happen, there's Twitter backlash that the Marlins busted again and blah blah blah. But no, you got to give guys a chance to figure things out, and I think this guy's doing fine. I think you're seeing exactly what the hit tool is that draft evaluators said about him, and that he has a 60, 65, 70 grade hit tool, maybe at its ceiling. So he is a pure hitter. I really do think the hit tool is something to believe in. So the question will be, coming by the power and stuff like that. But in terms of putting the ball in play, this guy's been doing it quite frequently, as you said, Eli. And I really do think that is not something that can be said about a lot of guys in their first full season pro. So I know there's probably going to be a lot of people that disagree with me and DM me and give me backlash on Jacob Berry, which is fine. But no, I think he's doing good. He's ending the season strong. I think he'll have some good confidence going into his first MLB spring train or MILB spring training next season. So I am a believer in Jacob Berry.
Adam, you wanted to give your thoughts on maybe Jordan Groshans or Berry, Mr. Jacob Berry there.
Yeah, my bad. I forgot Alex was on here and he was probably more qualified to answer that. I was like, oh crap. But yeah, so I mean, like with Jacob Berry, I've got to say I'm very impressed with how well he's been playing the past 20 games, 25 games or so. Really picked it up since I'm looking at here. It's August 14th. He's WRC plusing 158. And obviously, I'm kind of cherry picking when he started playing well. But regardless, that's still a sample size of 20 games, 75 at bats, where, he's really putting not only making strong contact, but he's putting bat to ball very well. And the quality of the contact, as I've mentioned, has been very good. Like Alex mentioned, he's still kind of hitting quite a few balls onto the ground. So that's going to have to take a swing plane change at some point. Hopefully that'll take place in the off season or in MILB spring training. But yes, I mean, I think like he's going to be a quick riser. The bat is like going to be the carrying tool. I wouldn't be surprised at some point if they cut bait on his defense completely and he's going to be a DH, which is why he's not my cup of tea of prospect. Because he's very one or two dimensional. But like I will say, like I think he'll definitely like Alex mentioned, he'll be in Beloit starting next year. Then if he's all goes well, he'll be in Pensacola. There's a strong chance that if he plays really, really well, we might see him in Miami by the end of next year or potentially the beginning of 2024. It's a real possibility. And I think for Groshans, I think if it doesn't, it's not going to happen this year, I don't think, unless there's some weird funky movements, and you guys would know more about this than I would in terms of who gets moved up and who gets moved down. But if not, then like they might do the whole 2-week service time manipulation next year, which they've been stopping. I think they're like not doing that practice anymore. But if they do, they'll do that, and then they'll probably bring him up at some point in April or May, depending on how he's playing. In Jacksonville starting next year. So both of them are very good prospects that I'm very excited for. I think both of them are going to be players that are going to be important in Miami's future rebuild or continued lasting rebuild here, but hopefully it'll end someday when these guys will be part of it. So I'm very excited about the bat, at least from what we're seeing from Jacob Berry, but like hopefully it's going to be carrying enough, and that's why that was my concern with him, and especially with Jordan Groshans, the power coming kind of like back to life now that he's in South Florida, or at least in Florida in general. So I don't think Jacksonville is South Florida, but hopefully we can see both of them play really well going forward.
Yeah, and with that, I think now is the perfect time to segue to our favorite part of the stream. Mr. Eli, hit the video, please.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
Now is prediction time. For those of you who may be new here in prediction time, we give our prediction for who will win the series, how many games the Marlins will win, and series MVP could be from either team, any position. Adam, I will have you kick it off for us.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with my default. The opposite team wins 2 out of 3, so I'm gonna go with the Mets winning 2 games here. And for my MVP, I'm gonna go with Eduardo Escobar. He was someone I was looking at earlier today, and he's been playing really well recently, so he's my pick. So I'm gonna go with him.
All right, Alex, can you give us your predictions for the series?
I'm going to agree with Adam, and I'm going to say that the Marlins somehow salvage a game, and get one out of the way and get one done. So let's say Mets 2 out of 3. MVP is an interesting pick here. It could literally be anybody. Let's go with former Marlins draft pick Mark Canha. There you go. MVP Mark Canha, 3 Mets.
All right. Eli, your prediction, please. One of the top leaders in predictions, along with myself, or the leader.
No, I think I've separated myself from you all year long. So you shouldn't paint that any other way. Inside this mug, I actually have some wine with me this evening.
Ooh.
So maybe that has gotten to my head a little bit and clouded my judgment. But based on what I've heard from you guys and what I'm seeing from the super followers, I do think this makes me fairly unique. And so perhaps this is a big risk to take, but I'm not going to just, sit on my laurels and pad my lead. I am picking the Marlins to win this series. And it's going to be led by the recently red hot Garrett Cooper. I think he's going to have some critical hits in the series against a Mets team that is not quite as good as their record says right now. They are vulnerable, and I think the Marlins are going to take advantage and win 2 out of 3 of the series.
Wow. Are we sure it's wine in that drink, Eli? Well, really quick before we get to our next prediction, here is for the score for this year: Eli 51, I'm Phil 49, Kevin 44, Isaac, Alex, Noah, Lewis, and I think the last 2 might be Grant and Adam. But it's a close race into the top between Eli and I. But next, Travis as our guest. What is your prediction? How many games do the Marlins win, and your MVP?
Oh man, I'm just hoping to pop my prediction cherry and get up on that board for next time, my Dolphins 33, Patriots 13. I'm going with, and we got it. No, seriously,
Tyreek Hill MVP.
Waddle, Hill, somebody. It'll be great. No, I got a couple more days where I'm still a Marlins fan before I'm a Dolphins fan. So it'll be great. I'm into this series. Even if I don't watch it, I'm going to be following it closely on game day and on Twitter and all that. I think my heart's telling me Vogelbach. He might get his first stolen base or something this season. But my head, I'm going to go with my head, and that's Lindor.
Okay.
I think we're looking at a couple triples, 2 home runs. He's going to push 2 or 3 Marlins off the bag at second. He's going to have a good series. But I'm actually going to go with Eli for the series prediction. I think the Marlins are going to take 2 out of 3 here, which is incredible because I've become a huge Marlins cynic in the past couple months. But I think I think our pitchers outclassed their pitchers, our starters this series. Looking up at the tentative matchups, I think we got, ERA only means so much, but I think we got the ERA advantage in all 3 matchups. I like Pablo to give us a good chance to win his game, and I don't know, either Cabrera or Luzardo give us a really good chance too. So I think we can take 2. I think the Mets, again, it's September, and I think by the end of the series, we're still not going to the playoffs, but Atlanta will be in first place in division, so it made that impact.
Yeah. Let's get really quick before I get my prediction of some other Fish Stripes members who aren't here on the stream. I have Lewis. He has Marlins to win 2 out of 3, and his MVP will be the Polar Bear, Pete Alonso. Isaac, who is in the press box, have the Mets winning 2 out of 3, and just like Adam, he has Eduardo Escobar as his MVP. And one and only Kevin, for his series prediction, Mets sweep, Brandon Nimmo as his MVP. That's a good one right there. But for yours truly, I'm all about the prediction points. Give me those prediction points. Give me that lead. I have Mets taking 2 games. Francisco Lindor, MVP. I think that's going to be chalk. I think that's what's going to happen. Give me 3 points. Give me that prediction lead. I am looking for it, Eli. I'm coming after you.
Good. And yeah, I zoned out during both Adam's and Alex's predictions. So Alex, could you remind me, did you have the Marlins winning 1 or 0 in your prediction? Just so I could put it in here.
I had them winning 1 game.
Okay. So I thought. Very good. So we're all set with this. Yeah, that's been a very common prediction. Yeah, for the Mets to win 2 out of 3. And I don't know. When I dive deep into this and when I have, a little bit of substance in me, it makes me tilt a different direction with this, all things considered, but we'll find out soon enough. So yeah, we thank everybody for tuning in to this one. I think as we're finding out during football season, so we want to make sure to have these on non-football game days as much as possible because we get a better audience that way. So thanks everybody for tuning in. As I already said, no stream on Monday for the Rangers thing. So we'll be back on Tuesday with a very, very big guest that I hope people will enjoy. Travis himself being an excellent guest in his own right, but this one being somebody that's perhaps known to a more broader audience and another first-time guest just like Travis is.
Travis, really quick, your Dolphins prediction on the season, their record, and do they make the playoffs?
Yeah, they're going to make the playoffs, I think. 11-5 or something like that, wild card. I think, God, the Bills looked really good. I don't want to put too much stock into one game, but the Bills looked really good. But I'm excited for the new Dolphins era, but I always drink the Kool-Aid, so I could be very wrong.
Also, I have Tua MVP, Super Bowl, all that. But that does it for this series preview for Daniel, for Eli, Adam, Travis, Alex, for Isaac in the press box, Kevin at Bandcamp, and Lewis working out. This has been Fish Stripes Live, and always go fish.
We got to end it off right. We got to